To the world, Dean Martin was the king of cool, but in reality, he spent his final years as a ghost. After the tragic death of his son, Dean stopped living. He just waited. Watching him from the shadows was a woman who loved him most, his ex-wife, Jeanne. She reveals a heartbreaking truth. Dean didn't die of old age. He died of a broken heart. His final wish was devastatingly simple. I'm just waiting to join him. How did the man who had everything lose the only thing that mattered? This is a tragic story of Dean Martin's long goodbye. The man who fooled the world. To understand the depth of his final silence, you have to understand the noise of his life, and you have to understand the mask he wore. Dean Martin was the greatest illusionist in Hollywood history. He convinced the world he was a boozy, lazy, happy-go-lucky playboy who stumbled onto the stage and accidentally became a star. He held a glass of whiskey on stage, slurring his words, making jokes about his hangover, but it was all an act, a brilliant, carefully crafted performance. The whiskey in his glass? It was usually apple juice. The slurred speech? Rehearsed timing. Dean Martin was actually a disciplined, private, and deeply introverted man who treated fame like a job he couldn't wait to clock out of. He was born Dino Crocetti in Steubenville, Ohio, in 1917. He was the son of Italian immigrants. He didn't speak English until he was 5 years old. He was bullied for his accent. He was mocked for his clothes. He learned early that if you make people laugh, they won't hurt you. If you act cool, they won't see you bleed. He clawed his way up from the gutter. He worked as a gas station attendant, a steel mill laborer, and a blackjack dealer in an illegal casino. He boxed under the name Kid Crochet, earning a broken nose and a scarred lip. He wasn't born with a silver spoon. He was born with iron fists and a velvet voice. When he teamed up with Jerry Lewis, they became the biggest comedy act in the world. When he joined Frank Sinatra in the Rat Pack, they conquered Las Vegas. When he launched the Dean Martin Show, he conquered television, becoming the highest-paid entertainer in America. By the 1970s, he had it all. He had the fame. He had the fortune. And most importantly, he had the family. He married Jeanne Beager in 1949. She was a stunning model, the Orange Bowl Queen, a woman of grace and beauty. Jeanne was the love of his life. She gave him stability in a chaotic world. She raised their 3 children, Dean, Paul, Richie, and Gina, along with his 4 children from a previous marriage. For 24 years, they were the golden couple of Hollywood. But Dean was a difficult man to love. Despite the warmth of his voice, he was emotionally distant. He was a man who needed to be alone, even when he was with people. He would often retreat to his room to watch old westerns, shutting out the world. As he famously said in a rare moment of honesty, I have 7 kids and I love them, but I don't want to talk to them. This emotional distance eventually destroyed his marriage. Jeanne divorced him in 1973. It was a bitter split, fueled by his withdrawal and the pressures of his fame. Dean tried to fill the void with other women, marrying a 3rd time, but it ended quickly. He spent the next decade drifting. He played golf. He recorded songs, but he was withdrawing further into his shell. He thought he'd seen the worst of life. He thought he was safe in his solitude, but he was wrong. The universe had one final, crushing blow waiting for him, and it would strike at the one person Dean Martin loved more than himself. The Golden Boy and the Mountain. If Dean Martin had a heart, it beat for his eldest son with Jeanne, Dean Paul Martin. Dean Paul was everything Dean wanted to be. He was handsome, talented, and an athlete. He was a tennis pro who played at Wimbledon. He was a Golden Globe-nominated actor. He was a captain in the Air National Guard. Dean called him his golden boy. While Dean was a distant father to most of his children, struggling to connect, he had a special, unspoken bond with Dean Paul. They understood each other. They shared a love for flying, for danger, for living life on their own terms. Dean Paul was a proof that Dean had done something right in this world. He was his legacy. But on March 21st, 1987, the nightmare began. Dean Paul was piloting an F-4 Phantom jet during a routine training mission out of March Air Force Base. The weather turned. A sudden, violent snowstorm engulfed the San Bernardino Mountains in California. The clouds were thick, blinding. The radar lost contact. When Dean heard the news that his son's plane was missing, the color drained from his face. The man who was always cool, always in control, began to shake. For 3 agonizing days, search teams scoured the mountains. For 3 days, Dean sat by the phone in his Beverly Hills home. He chain-smoked. He prayed to a God he hadn't spoken to in years. He bargained. "Take me," he surely thought. "Take me instead." Jeanne, his ex-wife, rushed his side. The divorce didn't matter anymore. The past arguments didn't matter. They were just 2 terrified parents, holding hands in the dark, waiting for news that would end their lives. They sat together in silence, united by a fear that only a parent can understand. Then the call came. The wreckage had been found. The plane had slammed into the side of the mountain at 400 miles per hour. There were no survivors. Dean Paul was 35 years old. When Dean heard the words, something inside him physically broke. Friends say he didn't scream. He didn't rage. He just collapsed. It was as if the lights in a grand hotel were turned off, one by one, until only darkness remained. He looked at Jeanne, and they both knew their lives were over. They were still breathing, but they were dead. Dean Paul wasn't just a son. He was a future. And now, the future was gone. This is the tragedy of outliving your child. It goes against the natural order. It is a pain that has no name and no cure. For a man like Dean, who defined himself by his coolness, this was a pain he couldn't charm his way out of. He couldn't joke about it. He couldn't drink it away. The golden boy was gone, and he took his father's spirit with him into the grave. The slow suicide. After the funeral, Dean Martin didn't kill himself. At least not with a gun. He chose a slower, more painful method. He committed what friends called a suicide of the soul. At the time of the crash, Dean was preparing for a massive reunion tour with Frank Sinatra and Sammy Davis Jr. It was called the Ultimate Event. It was supposed to be the triumphant return of the Rat Pack. Dean tried to go on. He tried to perform. But when he walked on stage, the spark was gone. He looked lost. He tossed cigarettes into the audience with a blank stare. He forgot lyrics, not as a joke this time, but because his mind was elsewhere. After a few shows, he quit. He told Sinatra, "I can't do it, Frank. I just can't." He went home, and he essentially never came out again. He retreated to his large, empty house in Beverly Hills. The man who was once the life of the party, who needed noise and laughter to breathe, now craved only silence. He cut off his friends. He stopped returning calls from Sammy Davis Jr. He stopped seeing Frank. He spent his days sitting in a chair, watching old westerns on TV with the volume turned down. He wasn't watching the movies. He was just watching the time pass. He was waiting for the clock to run out. His routine became a ritual of mourning. Every evening, he would put on a tuxedo or suit, ever the gentleman, and go to his favorite Italian restaurant, La Famiglia. He would sit at the same table, alone. He would order a bowl of pasta that he barely touched. He would drink his wine, and he would stare at the empty chair opposite him. Who was he seeing in that chair? Was it Dean Paul? Was it the life he used to have? Waiters knew not to disturb him. Fans knew not to ask for autographs. He radiated a sadness so profound that it acted like a force field. He was a monument to grief. He stopped taking care of himself. Decades of smoking caught up with him. He was diagnosed with emphysema, then lung cancer. Doctors urged him to get surgery. They told him they could extend his life. They told him he had years left if he fought. Dean looked at them with tired eyes and said, "Why?" He refused treatment. He refused surgery. He refused a fight. He told his friend, "I've had a good run. I'm ready." He wasn't fighting for life anymore because the best part of his life was already gone. He was just waiting for the ticket to be punched. He viewed death not as an enemy, but as a friend who was running late. But he wasn't entirely alone in this darkness. There was one person who refused to let him fade away completely unnoticed. His wife, Jeanne. The silent watcher. This is a part of the story that turns a tragedy into a heartbreaking love story. Dean and Jeanne had been divorced for 14 years when their son died. They had lived separate lives. They had hurt each other. They had signed papers that said they were no longer family. But the crash on the mountain rewired their connection. Grief has a way of erasing paperwork. It binds people together with chains that cannot be broken. Jeanne didn't move back in, but she moved back into his shadow. She became his silent watcher. She became his guardian angel in the dark. When Dean went to the restaurant to eat alone, Jeanne would often go too. She wouldn't sit with him. She knew he needed his solitude. She knew he couldn't handle conversation or pity. So she would sit at a table nearby, just watching him, making sure he ate something, making sure he was okay, making sure he wasn't alone in the room. It was a devastating dance. Two parents, shattered by the same loss, orbiting each other in the dark. She was living for him, and he was living for the past. Friends say they would sometimes exchange a look across the room, a look that communicated more than 1,000 words. It was a look that said, "I remember him too. I miss him too. I am broken too." Jeanne became the keeper of his flame. She protected him from the press. She managed his affairs when he no longer cared about money or contracts. She loved him until the very end, not as a glamorous husband she married, but as the broken father of her lost boy. She understood that Dean wasn't being cruel by pushing the world away. He was just finished, and you don't abandon someone just because they are finished. As Dean's health deteriorated in 1995, as his breathing became labored and his body failed, Jeanne was there. She was a constant presence. She knew what he was waiting for. She knew that every breath he took was a burden. She held the hand of the man who had broken her heart, and she helped him walk toward the exit. She gave him permission to go. Christmas Day. It is poetic that Jeanne Martin chose Christmas Day to leave. December 25th, 1995. The world was celebrating, but in Dean's room, there was only quiet. He was 78 years old. His lungs finally gave out, but those close to him knew the truth. He didn't die of emphysema. He died of a broken heart that had been bleeding for 8 years. When the news broke, the lights of the Las Vegas Strip were dimmed. It was a rare honor. The city that never sleeps closed its eyes for 10 minutes to pay respect to the man who built it. But Dean wouldn't have cared about the lights. He would have cared that he was finally free. He was finally going to see his golden boy. At his funeral, the most poignant moment wasn't the music or the celebrity tributes. It was the silence of Jeanne. She had lost her son. Now she had lost her husband. She was the last survivor of their tragic family unit. She had fulfilled her duty. She had walked him home. Jeanne lived for another 21 years, but she never remarried. She dedicated her life to preserving their legacy until she passed away in 2016. Now, they are buried near each other. The family is finally reunited. The reunion. Today, Jeanne Martin is remembered as the king of cool. We see the mask. We see the charm. But we should remember the man behind the mask. The man who felt too deeply. The man who loved his son so much that he couldn't survive his loss. His story is a reminder that fame is a costume. Money is paper. The only thing that is real is the people we love. And when they are gone, the world becomes a very quiet place. Jeanne Martin isn't lonely anymore. We can imagine him now, somewhere beyond the stars. He's not holding a drink. He's standing next to a young man in a flight suit. And for the first time in a long time, Jeanne Martin is truly smiling. What do you think? Is it possible to die of a broken heart? Let us know in the comments below. Rest in peace, Dean. You don't have to wait anymore. Thank you for watching.